Okay, got it. That's what I expected. All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let's all go back to what we had discussed last time. Of course, last time we went into a number of different details. We went and talked about cleansing during bathroom usage. We talked about al-istijmar. We talked about toilet paper. We talked about cleansing ourselves and which direction and all those details. We also talked about, which is called khisal al-fitra, and we talked about Islamic hygiene, basically. We talked about circumcision, male circumcision. We talked about prepusectomy or FGM. We also talked about, which is, equivalent to, is equivalent, at least a prepusectomy would be equivalent to male circumcision. We also talked about trimming the pubic hair. We talked about cutting the mustache for men or trimming the mustache for men. We also talked about removing bodily hair for women, whether facial or bodily hair. We talked about removing underarm hair. We talked about cutting the fingernails. We went in details in regards to a number of different things. And we talked about lasers. We talked about waxing. We talked about all of that. So inshallah, inshallah, that's a covered topic. Some people asked me to go in more details, and I'd be happy to do so, but I thought if I were to go into lots of details, that it might actually be perhaps something that is too detailed, and most of you, we agreed that it would be somewhat summarized than actually too detailed. But if you want me to at any time go in further details, just write it in the chat. And if I can't see it in the chat, just write it, and you can unmute yourself and say, hey, can you go in details with that one? I'd like to understand it better. That's absolutely fine. Okay, now we're going to go into the chapter of أحكام الوضوء. Now, there's a difference between al-wudu with a fatha and between al-wudu with a dhamma. Al-wudu is basically, with a fatha, is basically the utensil that is used in the water that is used for wudu. Okay. Al-wudu is basically the actual process for removing the minor impurity, which is basically the process washing the face, the hands, the head, and the feet. Okay. Now, one thing I would say is that the word wudu or wadu actually comes from the root wada'a. Let me write that down because this one's quite interesting. What is wudu about and why are we even doing it? So the root is wada'a. And what does that root mean? Well, the root actually means to cleanse, to whiten. To cleanse, to whiten, to polish. Okay, that's what wada'a actually means. So let's see when we say ahkam al-wudu, think of it as the different rulings in order to polish yourself, to polish your body from the different sins that might actually be having an implication on you without you realizing. You want to remember that different things that you might do may even have an implication on you, may have somewhat of let's say, whether it's contamination or some effect on you, on your heart, on your spirituality. And you know what really interests me is the hadith when the Prophet ﷺ was praying Salat al-Fajr. And he was reading Surah Rum. And then the Prophet ﷺ after that said that he was getting some confusion in his recitation. And the reason for that, he said, is because some of those that are attending don't know how to do proper wudu. So the question is, how is it that someone else not doing proper wudu is going to have an effect on a person that's attending the masjid? And that's a thing. when you look at the world, when you look at the society, when you look at anything in physics, you cannot assume that something, let's say, miles away that is happening is not affecting you. It will affect you, whether you recognize it or you don't recognize it. It's all some kind of an energy. It's all some kind of a potential, whether it's a good thing or whether it's basically a harm that's affecting you without you realizing. Even if we're talking about spiritual things like maybe najasa, it will still harm you. It will affect you spiritually. It will affect your heart. It would even affect your brain. Now, when we're speaking about a contaminant, a najasa being over your body, you would assume that, oh, it's just over my body, nothing big. Why should it affect my heart? Why does it affect my spirituality? It's just my body. No, what you don't realize is that your body absorbs the different things that surrounds it. The different things that surround it, and therefore whatever that surrounds it is definitely going to be affecting you mentally, going to be affecting you spiritually, going to be affecting you even psychologically without you realizing. So when we usually just think of just the different environments that surround us, we would usually think, well, I have nothing to do with it. It's basically not related to me. It's not relevant to what I'm going through. But the Prophet ﷺ is also teaching us in another hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ had said that it's like the people going on a boat. There's the upper deck and there's the lower deck. If the people in the lower deck had attempted to open a hole inside the lower deck or in the middle of their lower deck, if the upper people had allowed them to do so, then they're all going to sink. But if the people in the upper deck and the people in the lower deck had all supported one another that, no, this is not something that we could do, then everyone's going to be saved and everyone's basically going to be protected. And that's the same thing. You might think something happening in Guatemala is irrelevant to you, but it is going to be coming at you without you realizing. And that's the same thing with politics. You might think, well, Syria is a faraway place from me, has nothing to do with me. But yes, it will have something to do with you. Same thing if we're talking about Pakistan. Same thing if we're talking about America. We're talking about anywhere. It's not just because they're Muslim, but it would still have an effect within whether global politics or whether socially or whether it's speaking about all the different economical changes, all of that, it will still have its effect. Same thing. We're speaking about wudu. Contaminations will have their effect. So learning how to make wudu, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordering in Surah Al-Ma'idah, if you have believed, when you rise to perform prayer, wash your faces and your forearms to the elbow and wipe over your heads and wash your feet to the ankles. Let's do it again. So what is this ayah ordering us to do? إِذَا قُمْتُمْ, if you rise to perform, then فَغْسِلُوا. So then wash. So this فَغْسِلُوا is an imperative verb telling me that it's obligatory. If I wanted to perform the prayer, then this is an imperative verb telling me that it's obligatory to wash the faces, wash the hands, well, the arms up to the elbows, and wipe over the heads and the feet. But wait a minute, the feet. So does that mean that the feet is included with the ones to be wiped, or are the feet to be included as wash your feet? Well, how did you get wash your feet? It's this tiny fatha right there. It actually goes back to the ones that have the category of being washed. Okay, so biru'usikum, notice that has the kasra right there, which is because of the letter ba. Okay, and now we know that the arjulakum, the reason it was put as the late the latest one was in order to speak about a certain order, but it is actually part of the organs and part of the areas that are to be washed. Okay, so now we know that this area had obligated that we would make wudu before prayer, not after, but before. Why? Because it had basically indicated that it precedes salah. The ayah also had mentioned what organs and what areas we're supposed to be washing, and certainly in order to just make the story short, in fiqh, we would usually study the definition and where the word comes from. So I'll just make the story short because we want to make it summarized in order to discuss different things. So we'll just give you, let's call it the butter. Let's go to the butter. Well, so the butter, you've got certain things that are considered obligatory acts in wudu, and other things that are considered sunan. What's the difference between a sunnah and an obligation? Okay, well, let's discuss that. The difference between sunan and fara'id. Okay, what's the difference? So when you're speaking about sunan, you're actually talking about things that are recommended. Okay, things that are recommended. Il-fara'id, they're things that are obligations. What's the difference? So recommended, if you don't do it, the act is still valid. And plus, if you were to do it, you will get rewarded for it. If you don't do it, you won't get held accountable for it. But a faridah, which is the second one, an obligation, actually means your act to do this particular thing is an obligation. If you do not do it, then therefore your act is incomplete, and therefore the implication is that your salah is invalid. Okay, got it? So with the fara'id, your act, if you don't do it, your at least wudu right here is invalid. If it's not there, your wudu is invalid. Therefore, your salah is invalid. Okay, let's see. There are 8 conditions. Let's look at this one. 8 conditions to make sure that your wudu is actually done right. Number 1, we've got being Muslim. So if a person is not Muslim, the wudu that they would do is actually invalid. Well, why is it invalid? I mean, it's something that's supposed to get them closer to Jannah. Okay, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. So question, if we're getting people coming to the masjid, should we take them to do wudu and teach them how it's done? Or anyways, their wudu is not valid, so why even teach them how to do it? Their wudu is not valid anyways, or their salah is not valid anyways. So one thing is that we would know with doing da'wah, the more barriers you take down between you and even the non-Muslims, the closer they become and the more interested they become to learning the deen and learning Islam. So certainly, definitely, let them go to, let's probably maybe tell them what the masjid contains. Here's the place to make wudu. This is how we wash. If they want to participate in making the wash, yes, here's how we do it. Wash the face, hands, head, feet. Face, hands, head, feet, and just to give them some form of an instruction. And of course, once they enter the masjid, maybe give them a free gift, maybe a free hijab, or maybe just something that they could probably learn how to enter the masjid, how to see what's inside the masjid, how to ask questions. All of that is definitely very good to do, even if their salah is not valid and even if their wudu is not valid. Go ahead, Noura.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask because you had just you just said that hadith, right? About making sure that you have like a person who doesn't have good wudu.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if
anything
they're
that
not
we
Muslim and they're, you know what I mean? Doesn't that affect the salah?
Well, anyways, they wouldn't be praying, all right? They wouldn't be, I mean, even if they can join if they want to, all
Right.
right? But at the end, there is, let's call it a benefit from all of this. The benefit is
Yeah.
to break a lot of barriers and
And to
let
bring them
them
from shirk
feel
to tawheed.
exactly,
Okay,
exactly.
Jazakallah khair.
Show them what it's like, let them get a sense, let them get a feeling, let them break the barriers of fear. All right. And this we had seen many start off with their Islam just by coming to the masjid. And I don't know if you remember Noura Malaika, she used to come to our class, and she was just coming to take Arabic classes at Masjid al-Huda. And that's
Oh,
when she was
did she join in the salah before?
um
I know some sisters have, subhanallah. Yeah.
Yeah, we had some especially in prison. In prison, we used to have a lot of women actually join in prayer, join in, well, we can't take them to do wudu. That's a different pass in prison. It's a different pass, but we had a lot of inmates. They're called inmates in prison. We would basically gather to do salah. We would teach them how to make wudu, even if it's not necessarily doing it in an actual bathroom site, because that's against the policies, the prison policy. But we would do together, even if it virtually, or even if it's, imaginary. We would be there in the prison, but we would pretend that there's water just to let them practice on how to do it. Um, and subhanAllah, just breaking down these barriers, we had a number of different people actually become Muslim. If you really, really want to enjoy, and it's not an enjoyment to mean entertainment, but I must admit, the best da'wah and the scariest da'wah, and at least the most depressing da'wah and the most joyful da'wah, as oxymoron as it sounds, is doing da'wah in prisons. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, yeah, I remember doing it a few times, subhanallah.
Nothing like doing da'wah in
And
prisons,
a
Noura.
lot of people, not all of them obviously, but they repented, you know what I mean?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
They are looking, Wallahi al-Azim, they're looking for Islam. They're looking for Islam. They're looking for anything that would help them out of the dhulumat, or the darkness of sin, or the darkness of where they're at, and all of that. I know they would be coming not in order to listen to your class. Sometimes they would come because, hey, there's no other activity. Okay, if it means going to, I guess, the chapel, or going to the church, or whatever it is, the library, instead of sitting in this place, yeah, why not? And they'll come and listen, and some will leave, some won't like what they're listening to, but many will stay, and many will really have a lot of interest. And yes, I didn't like the doors being closed, didn't like all that scrutiny. Certainly, some people don't know how to speak without saying bad words. You want to remember, their lifestyle is basically centered around games, around drugs, around all of that. So it's not always, I mean, I'm not somebody that's used to hearing bad words. Um, so to hear it often, it becomes like, okay, I can't handle this. But um, it's something that you have to somehow, I don't want to say get normalized with, but to do da'wah, you just have to recognize it's a different world in prisons than in college, on college campuses. Okay. فالشروط الثمانية. So 8 different conditions for wudu. Number 1, Islam. Number 2 is being mentally sound. Well, the question is, what is mentally sound? What defines mentally sound? So mentally sound means that the person understands what they are doing, why they're doing it, and how to do it. What they're doing, why they're doing it, and how to do it. That's what it means to be mentally sound. And it depends on the type of mental illness. So when we're talking about depression, the person knows what doing salah means, knows how to do the wudu, and understands that it's an obligation, etc. Okay. Same thing if we're talking about somebody probably maybe on the autism spectrum. They are capable of understanding that, but if somebody is probably severely autistic, they'll probably even, they'll probably even not know how to even go to the bathroom and use the bathroom and probably spill on themselves. Then they probably need diapers, etc. That's a different stage. Okay. I don't know why they would put the ones that are on the autism spectrum in the same category as a person that is severely autistic, because there's definitely a huge difference, a
Yeah,
huge
yeah,
difference.
I agree.
It's sometimes, to be honest, I mean, excuse my ignorance on that, but sometimes I feel that there's some exaggeration on this whole classification of autism, but that's a different thing to probably discuss with experts. So that, excuse my ignorance on this one, but um, that's a different story. But if we're talking about somebody in the autism spectrum, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not held accountable. No, they are held accountable because they're able to process what to do and how to do it, and they're able to understand a number of different things. Certainly, they may be delayed in comparison with other people, in maybe their social interaction with other things. They may be delayed compared to others, but they are still capable of understanding to sometimes even better than how we understand things, because 10% of these people are actually geniuses. Okay. So what if we're speaking about somebody with OCD, it's a mental illness, or somebody that is probably schizophrenic, which is, of course, different stages in schizophrenia. So not every level of schizophrenia is the same thing. So if we're speaking about somebody that is probably on medication, somebody that is probably not capable of understanding their hearing, psychosis. So, we're speaking about different levels of mental illness. So to make the story short, if the person is not capable of understanding, if the person is not capable of implementing, if the person is not capable of being aware of what needs to be done and why they're doing it, then they're not going to be held accountable. Let's just say it this way. Sometimes we don't know how much they know and how much they understand. So we could attempt, but if this is bringing in a bigger harm, probably on you, maybe as a person that's treating or helping guide them, but then of course some situations where they can be maybe violent, they can refuse in hard ways, etc. If you're not capable of teaching them, then in that situation, stay safe, do as much as you can, but that's basically all that you could do. Okay, so that's in terms of al-aql. التمييز. What is التمييز? التمييز is more of having discretion. No, not that. التمييز is being able to recognize the different things around you. So what are we talking about recognizing? We're speaking about recognizing, for example, that this is safe, this is dangerous, this is what mom had said, this is what she meant by that. This is safe to do, this is dangerous. I shouldn't be going out the door and just roaming around. It's too dangerous for me. You give a direction and say, hey, I want you to eat your cereal after, for example, maybe, I don't know, after you finish your food or whatever it is, whatever direction you want to give them. They're capable of understanding what it means to follow orders. They are capable of recognizing different things. In other words, this is part of being mentally sound, by the way. التمييز and العقل, they're part of being mentally sound, but العقل more relates the person being capable of implementing whatever is basically understood by them that this needs to be done. التمييز is usually at the age of 7 and above. 7 and above is usually the age of tamyiz. What is that? They're capable of recognizing. When you're talking to a 7-year-old, it's completely different than when you're talking to a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. A 3-year-old, they may communicate, they may understand, of course, from one child to another is completely different, but at age 7, they're capable of understanding that they have to line up, they have to stand, etc. Okay. النية. When we're speaking about intention, we're speaking about something that is within. So it's an intention to mean inside of you and does not have to be uttered. The madhab Shafi'i is the only madhab that regarded that niyyah is to be uttered, and it's not supposed to be something that is at least internally done, but it's supposed to be overtly mentioned, meaning it is supposed to be audible, it is supposed to be mentioned orally according to Shafi'i. But there's really no evidence on that, to be honest, that you would have to mention the niyyah. Just wanted to mention that one. So if you would be in a Shafi'i area, just like here, I'm in Malaysia, and yesterday they were doing some I don't know, some event. Most of it I didn't understand. In fact, 99.9% of it I didn't understand because it was in Malaysian, or they called it Bahasa Melayu or something. Anyhow, they were doing nasheed, and they actually had music in the masjid along with the nasheed, literally. So it was all
I mean, with
these.
instruments and everything?
Well, not, they're percussion instruments, so it wasn't flutes and piano
Oh,
and
okay,
all that.
okay.
No, percussion instruments, but, it was the instruments that, the percussion instruments, but on the sides, it wasn't just a duf, it wasn't just a tambourine, but it was also having the tabla, the tabla, which is, one other kind of drum. And it was also those drums that had these on the sides that had these metal things on the side. So, all of that. And some sound effects. So that was in the masjid. They're doing their dhikr, but then that was coming along with it. Okay, so let's continue right there. So فلا يصح الوضوء من كافر ولا مجنون. So then, of course, we know that piece of it. And therefore, wudu from a disbeliever is not permitted, right? And wudu from somebody that is not mentally sound is also not acceptable. Okay, but can we train them? The answer is yes. Even if somebody is not mentally sound, we can still train them, and that's how it starts, of course. Okay, and certainly if a person was making wudu in order to, I guess, cool themselves, it's not going to be a valid wudu unless they would have an intention to do it. So yes, person A dived into the water and person B dived into the water the same way. They both, boom, dived into the water, but person A has wudu and person B does not have wudu. What's the difference? Person A had the intention to have wudu and to go out of this dive with the intention to make wudu as well, that it would be included. Person B just dived in because they just wanted to basically get into the water and just enjoy it. Okay, let's see. Another thing that is a condition is that the wudu is basically tahur, that it's using pure water. Well, what does it mean to use pure water? So we're speaking about pure water. Remember, no taste, no smell, and certainly no change of color. That's what it means that the water is tahur. Think of it as organic water. okay, as organic. What if this was river water? Okay, this is river water, but you could really smell the stinky smell of fish in it, but it's river water. Okay, you could still smell the smelly fish, especially at certain times and in certain lakes or probably certain rivers, you could smell a certain smell. And certain times of the year, I remember in Minnesota, there were certain times of the year that there was a certain smell to the lakes. Okay. Then in that situation, can you actually make wudu using that water despite the smell? Certainly, you could still use the water, even though it has the smell of fish in it. Why? Because إذا بلغ الماء قلتين فلن يحمل الخبث. If the water, if the water is let's say plenty enough, where we're gonna get to the details of what it means to be plenty. We're speaking about almost, if I'm not mistaken, almost 50 liters of water. Don't take my word for it. Then it wouldn't necessarily contain najasa. So same thing if we're speaking about the pool, we're smelling chlorine within the pool, and we know that there are children that might urinate in the pool. The pool is still tahir. The pool is still tahir. Well, what about the chlorine smell? I thought you said you can't change the smell. We're speaking about changing the smell, meaning changing the whole substance for the water. Okay, but this water is big enough that even if you were to put chlorine, the amount of chlorine that is put in it, it's basically that that chlorine that gives, that gives that smell, the chlorine that gives the smell, but the amount of chlorine is actually small, so they don't necessarily pour all these things, so you're not swimming in chlorine, but you're actually swimming in water. But the amount of chlorine is basically to, take away algae and fungi and all of that stuff. Okay. And to keep it at least pure. Okay. So think of it as soap. All right. Let's see. The other condition is that it would be mubah. What does it mean that the water is mubah? It means it was legally obtained. Scholars actually had differences of opinions on that, believe it or not. So what if a person steals water and then makes wudu with it? Is their wudu valid or not? Scholars had differences of opinions because some scholars actually said the wudu itself is valid, but the process or the method that the person used to get water is basically invalid, or at least they're at sin for it. Okay. And you could say that's not what the author is considering as the preponderant, but just wanted to mention that one. Let's see. The other condition is that there would be preceding wudu is that the person would have done istinja or istijmar. What is istinja? So the word istinja basically means to wash the private area, or istijmar is to remove the contamination on the private area using stones, using toilet paper, but not using water. Okay, that's istijmar. Istinja would be with using water. Okay, do we have to use the bathroom, meaning you doing istinja before wudu? The answer is no. When do we do istinja? We would only do istinja or istijmar only if basically number one or number two, basically urinating or defecation, that would be the only time that you would have to use istijmar or istinja. Other than that, you don't have to use istijmar or istinja, and it would basically suffice to do wudu without using the bathroom necessarily. Using the bathroom is only if the person had contaminated the area. Passing wind does not require doing istinja or istijmar. Okay. All right. Let's see. And it is also obligatory that a person would remove anything that blocks the water from penetrating the skin. That's a simple one, right? It's really strange how some are just so, I don't know, they're finding it hard to implement this one and feel that, no, I need to have my nail polish, etc. SubhanAllah, I mean, selling your akhirah for dunya in just wanting to appear in a certain way. The best appearance that you could be in is the appearance of, remember what the word wudu means? It means to glow, it means to polish, it means to whiten. The best beautification that you can have is the beautification where you're glowing of light. Remember, wudu is all about glowing. Okay. When you're glowing of light, it's basically you're glowing of light. It's basically that's what wudu is all about. Just think of it as, yes, in each and every single pore, there's going to be light on Judgment Day. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said he would be capable of recognizing his ummah based on their appearance, because they would appear as al-ghurr al-muhajjalin, like the horses that would have a white spot on their forehead. Al-ghurr al-muhajjalin. Let's look and what does that look like? Al-ghurr. Let's write it down. Al-ghurr. Sorry, but my kids let the cat. Here we go. Let the cat play on my laptop, and it took out one of those keys, which is the V and the Ra. Here's al-ghurr al-muhajjalin. Let's look at it. Well, not this guy. Hold on, ghurr al-muhajjalin. Okay, now. Okay, I wanted to ghurr al-muhajjalin. Al-hisan, maybe. Here we go. This is it. This is al-ghurr al-muhajjal. It's basically the white spot comes in as a diamond right at their forehead. So the Prophet ﷺ would recognize the effect of wudu from this little part that would appear on their forehead. That would be al-ghurr al-muhajjalin. The Prophet ﷺ said that's the light of wudu that he would be, and they would be capable of saying, well, wait a minute. So why light? I mean, why isn't it anyways too bright on Judgment Day? Because there's going to come a time where the sun is going to be so near the people. Now that's a lot of brightness right there. Right. So there are different stations on Judgment Day. Some stations it's going to be extremely bright because the sun is going to be going down. And some stations it's going to be completely dark, pitch black, where you would need that light in order to pass as-sirat. Ya Rabbi, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those that would have light in their faces and light on their tongues and light in their eyes and light in their ears and light above them and light that they would always carry on their right and light on their left. Okay, so another thing is, of course, we would have to remove anything that's blocking the wudu from penetrating, whether we're speaking about something, maybe dirt, or whether we're speaking about some kind of a perhaps acrylic, or maybe some kind of dough or whatever it is, or henna, whatever, plastic or whatever, probably clay on there, anything that is blocking the water from penetrating, whether the fingernails or whether it's the body itself, it must be removed. So can I just wear wudu, like have wudu, wear those acrylic nails and just wipe over them exactly like you would wipe over your shoes? So I'll just basically consider that just like I'm wiping over my shoes, and just like you said that we can wipe over our turban / hijab, then I'll just wear my acrylic beautiful nails and I'll make wudu before putting them on. So remember when we said al-ibadat tawqifiyya? Let's use that word again. Tawqifiyya. What does that mean? So we said ibadat when it comes to the rules of worship in Islam, they are tawqifiyya, meaning that we would take the rules and the restrictions and we would take the different regulations basically from the Prophet ﷺ, and we would not do qiyas. We wouldn't do any kind of analogy. So we cannot say, okay, well, just like I would do wudu before making the wiping over the feet, and yeah, there we go. I could do qiyas and I could do with the same analogy. I'll just make wudu and just basically wipe over my acrylic nails. We would say this is a qiyas. Al-qiyas is not to be done in ibadat. Is not to be done in worship. Why not? Because worship itself does not have a specific analogy that was clear to us, and therefore we do not do qiyas or any kind of an analogy or some kind of making our own measurement of things or making our own understanding of things, but we would basically base it on tawqifi, meaning that it would have to be wahi based, revelation based. It's based on the revelation, based on text, not your own analogy, not your own imagination of what might actually make sense too. Because al-ibadat, we don't actually have some kind of an analogy that we can scrutinize or research because we don't actually have any information in regards to the different analogies and the different wisdoms behind why are we praying duhur 4 rak'ahs and not 6? Why are they limited to a certain number? Why do we do tawaf? Why not just take a moment and just ponder in the place and probably all hold hands together around the Kaaba and together labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Hey, that's going to be very spiritual. Why are we each walking on their own? It's going to be very inspirational if we were all to hold hands, men and women, and together close your eyes and everybody hallelujah labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Oh, we would say, wait a minute, that would be a straight bid'ah right there. Go ahead, Nora.
Sorry. So with the adhan, how come they had the qiyas for to be on the loudspeakers and stuff? I'm just curious how it is.
Okay, fair enough. That's not a qiyas, Nora. Al-qiyas is different. Let me explain this one. That's a very good question. What is al-qiyas? Al-qiyas is basically using this. Hold on. Let me explain qiyas to you. Okay, let's do it. It's called إلحاق فرع بأصل لاشتراكهما في علة الحكم. Okay, that's القياس. What does that mean? القياس means that I have subject A. Okay, I have subject A that is basically a known ruling. Alcohol, subject A. Okay, and I know subject A that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had considered subject A as haram because it leads to intoxication. Okay, then I'm going to get subject B. Then subject B, basically, no known ruling. No known ruling. But subject A and subject B both have something in common. Both have something in common, which is that it leads to, here we go, here's equals, intoxication. Intoxication. Okay? And the Prophet ﷺ said, Kullu muskirin haram. Everything or anything that leads to intoxication is going to be haram. Okay? So therefore, I would say subject B, since it has a common thing that it shares with A, with subject to A, and that is that it leads to intoxication, then in that situation, subject B would be considered as taking the same ruling as subject A. So adhan
Oh,
is
okay,
not
okay. Jazakallah
qiyas,
khair. It helps to
okay?
have a visual. Thank you.
Right. Adhan is not qiyas. We're not making qiyas here, but adhan, there's not something that I based it off another thing, and no, this is not at all of that. That was ijtihad, okay? Ijtihad is different. Ijtihad is different. What is ijtihad? Ijtihad is already looking at the circumstances. So here we go. I got the circumstances, okay? I got the tools, okay? What tools are we talking about? We're talking about text tools. We're talking about the tools to understand a situation. And we could see that the whole object is to make sure that everyone hears the adhan. So whether you're using your own human voice, or if you wanted to, if you had access to using microphones, you had something that would amplify the human voice, that's not a qiyas, that's ijtihad. Can we use these tools to amplify human voice? Yes, we can. What's the evidence? The evidence is that the Prophet ﷺ had used, for example, Al-Abbas. Al-Abbas ibn Abd al-Muttalib was actually known to having a very, very loud voice. The Prophet ﷺ would use Al-Abbas to call out on different things. So here it is. He had an exceptional loud voice compared to other people, but then he didn't consider that that was wrong to use and basically used whatever amplifies the human voice. This is ijtihad. Whatever gets to basically the conclusion that we need, the result that we need to get to the result that everyone is hearing the adhan, or everyone is capable of knowing that it's time for jihad, or we need to let everyone hear the khutbah, etc. So using the different material to have people hear that is basically a tool that we should be using to basically amplify or benefit or get to the same conclusion. You see that, Noura? That's not called qiyas.
Yeah,
Okay?
Jazakallah khair.
وإياكم. All right. So, all right, let's continue right there. Now, when we're also talking about فرائض الوضوء. So wait a minute. So you said these are shurut. Well, what's the difference between shurut? I thought you said those are sunan. Well, you didn't talk about shurut. Why didn't you say what shurut were? Okay, so the conditions are basically not within wudu. So it's basically something outside of wudu. So when you're talking about Islam, we're talking about mental awareness, or you're talking about intention, all of that. All right. Those are things that they have to be within wudu, but not necessarily simultaneously at the same time. So it's not like you're making shahada every time you're doing wudu, but the person had it before. They are already mentally sound. They are already right now. They're basically simultaneously, along with, while they were wanting to do wudu, they had their intention to make that as wudu probably 6 hours ago, or maybe 10 hours ago. Okay, so that would be niyyah. Okay, now when you're looking at same thing, using different water, etc. So this is outside of salah, outside of wudu, but it's a condition that precedes wudu. Now we're going into, well, what are the conditions that must be within the wudu itself? Okay, fara'id al-wudu. Those are called fara'id al-wudu, the obligatory acts of wudu. So we're talking about obligatory acts of wudu. Maybe I should give you, okay, let me give you the link for this, right? Let me give you the link for this and put it for you in the chat so you could see it, okay? What do we do here? Oh dear. I'm going to give you that link. That's what I expect. Okay, I'm going to give you the link for the English one, at least, even though I sent it to you on, I'll say, okay, here we go. And this is to everyone. Is this it? Yeah, no, assume so. Okay. So فرائض الوضوء, the obligatory acts in wudu, number one is washing all the face. Is the washing for the face, is it supposed to include the gargling that we do and basically the nasal wash that we do, washing your nostrils? Is that included or not? Differences of opinions between scholars on whether gargling or washing your mouth and also sniffing the water, on whether it is included or whether it is not included in washing the face. So let's see. Of course, the author, Hanbali based, فَغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ, he said, well, the ayah is pretty clear. It said, wash your faces, and therefore, he said, well, the nose and the mouth are basically part of the face, therefore they must be washed. But then that's a different debate, because some scholars actually said that's not on your face, that's inside your face. It's inside the cavity of your face, and therefore some scholars considered that it wouldn't be obligatory to wash. Okay, فَمَنْ تَرَكَ شَيْئًا مِنْهُ لَمْ يَكُنْ مُمْتَثِلًا أَمْرَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. So he basically wanted to say, well, if you are not going to be washing your face, that is, of course, including the nostrils and the mouth, then in that situation, you would not be applying the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the Prophet ﷺ himself had actually washed his nostrils and even did wudu. But then they debated whether, like I said, whether that is actually true or not. So some scholars actually said it's not obligatory. Okay, let's see. Washing the arms up until the what? Until the forearms, including the elbows. So here I want you to look at the word including. Okay, وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ is what the ayah says. And wash your hands up to the elbows. So scholars had differences of opinions in Lugha Arabiya on whether the word ila means up to something or whether it means to include something. So that's a differences of opinions in Lugha Arabiya. So the differences of opinions in Lugha Arabiya would also have an impact on the differences of opinions in fiqh. Okay, so just keep that one in mind. There are different reasons why scholars might have differences of opinions in fiqh. Number one, let's just write a couple things to remind you. Number one is that differences in the Arabic language to mean grammar, to mean basically the lexicon, or to probably talk about maybe, is it a figurative term? Is it what type? Is it an idiom? Is it a metaphor? Is it, what really are we looking at right there? So now then we would go into the Arabic grammar and all these different details. And another thing is that they had differences of opinions on sometimes the hadith itself. Is it authentic? Okay. They would have differences of opinions on the authenticity of the hadith. They might even have differences of opinions on interpreting the hadith. So hadith interpretation. Okay. They might even have differences of opinions on not only the authenticity and the interpretation, but they might even have differences of opinions on the timing for the hadith. Why is that even important, on the timing of the hadith? Because if we're speaking about something happening before and something happening later, that would actually mean one abrogates the other. Okay, so then that's another thing. Okay, and the other reason why they might have differences of opinions in sometimes in the interpretation itself. Interpretation. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, the interpretation itself. How do we understand all of this? And certainly there's another reason, which is understanding al-waqi' wal-nas, understanding the circumstance and also the text and how they go together, and certainly sometimes based on that, they might also have differences of opinions on what is the, here's the other thing right there, the legal maxim right there. Okay, so just keep those ones in mind. What is the legal maxim? What is the conclusion that we're trying to get to here? How do we understand this? Okay, so just keep those ones in mind, that we won't get confused. Okay, let's see. وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ, and wash your hands up to the elbows, because the Prophet himself had actually washed his own elbows. Let's see. There is another hadith. The Prophet غسل يديه حتى أشرع في العضد. That the Prophet washed his hands until he reached the upper arm. Okay. All right. So this indicates that the elbows are included. I guess he wanted to make sure that you understand that one. But are they or are they not? Differences of opinions. Okay. Just want to make the story short. Let's see. الثالث مسح الرأس كله. Wiping all the head. Is it wiping all, or is it wiping fourth, or is it wiping half? Differences of opinions between scholars. Why would they have differences of opinions? I mean, it was supposed to be clear. Why don't you just make things easy and just make one final answer and that's it? Because remember, this is a rahmah. This is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine if we would only have one answer to all the circumstances.
Yeah, we would have to wash all of our hair every time we make wudu, right?
Well, I mean, according to those scholars, certainly, but
Like, that's very hard when you're wearing hijab, okay?
right. But the most important thing is understanding that the differences of opinions is a rahmah. So if you, for example, you're praying at the masjid and this lady is a Pakistani and they're praying and they're, curling themselves up, and or Bengali, that's because the Hanafi regards that women are supposed to be praying that way. For the rest of the scholars, they considered that no, there's no difference between a man's prayer and a woman's prayer. So therefore, they considered for the Hanafi, and since Pakistanis and Indians, they're Hanafi, that's why you would see that the women are curled up in a certain way, and you're like,
Oh,
why is
yeah, subhanallah.
Right? You'd be like, why is she curled up that way? No, you're supposed to make a separation between your belly and your thighs. And you would be coming in and she would be looking at you like, oh man, you're coming in with the wrong Islam right there. Okay, just keep in mind, it's an issue of different madhab. It's an issue of a different madhab. So don't rush. I remember at Masjid al-Aqsa, we had a lot of Turkish people come into Masjid al-Aqsa. And, regardless, that hadith, that's not authentic. "Utruku turka ma tarakukum." It's not authentic, but I think it kind of makes sense. Leave the Turks as long as they leave you alone, just leave them alone. Don't mess with don't mess with them. That's basically "Utruku turka ma tarakukum." It's not an authentic hadith. But anyhow, so what happened was in Masjid al-Aqsa, we would get a lot of Turkish people, they're Hanafi madhab, and Palestinians in ibadat at least, they're generally Shafi'i madhab. So they would start their salah, and for Hanafis, they would have a certain way. So the person that's probably Palestinian trying to get them, to line up and probably trying to do something, and we would have fist fights right in the masjid. Turks beating up Palestinians because some Palestinians, they basically thought that they were supposed to line them up, or they kind of went a little bit too far in, or forcing them to do what they considered as the right thing. So yeah, so sometimes you just understand that if you want to order for what is good and forbid what is bad,
Seriously, fist fights?
fist fights, wallahi al-azim, fist
Oh
fights.
my God, subhanallah.
That actually takes me back to a story, Abdullah Azzam. Abdullah Azzam, remember at the time when, of course, America was supporting Al-Qaeda, and Abdullah Azzam was along with Tamim al-Adnani and all of those. Well, Tamim al-Adnani was actually coming to Minnesota, believe it or not, and coming to the US to collect donations outwardly and we would be, and everyone would give them donations just like that. Who was it for? It was for al-Qaeda, believe it or not. That was real, everybody, real. Wallahi, this is real. And America would even give them sponsorship and give them the visas to collect donations. Anyhow, that's a different story. But Abdullah Azam mentioned in his book, I remember he was talking about doing, a lot of Syrians, Palestinians, and Jordanians, and, they would basically pray. But of course, the Afghans are very strict Hanafi. So the whole thing about raising the finger while you're doing Tahiyyatu Lillah, that doesn't exist. And to them, it's considered a bid'ah. So the Palestinian guy was actually saying Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah Rasulullah, while doing the tashahhud, and he would lift his finger, the index finger, to do basically that tashahhud. But then the Afghan guy gets really furious, basically hits his finger, but then the Palestinian guy is like, okay, that must have been a mistake. So he raises it up again, and then the Afghan guy hits him again, and then the Palestinian guy is like, oh, what's going on here? I didn't do anything wrong. So he attempts it a third time, but the Afghan guy basically ducks down onto the guy's finger and actually bites it. So, and Abdullah Azam was mentioning the story of how it's important to learn the culture and the madhab that these people are coming from, in order to make sure you don't come across, I guess, certain, let's call it, contradictions with the people and how they're practicing it, because they will probably think that you're coming in with a new type of Islam and that somehow you are bringing in some kind of an aberration and probably maybe get ostracized or probably even get bitten. You don't want to do that. Okay. الأذنان من الرأس. The Prophet ﷺ had said the ears are part of the head. Okay, so what does that mean? So that means I wipe my head along with my ears. That's what you want me to do? Yes, wiping the ears. And scholars actually had differences of opinions on whether you have to use new water for wiping the ears or whether you could use the old water that you were using before. In other words, the old water meaning the one that you had wiped your head with. Okay, let's see number 4, washing the feet with the ankles. Okay, let's see, wiping over the head. So this is right there, wiping over the head. Now washing the feet, including the ankles. Well, just like we had said before in regards to, where was it? In regards to وَامْسَحُوا أَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى, just like we said before that إِلَى basically had differences of opinions between the scholars of Lugha Arabiya on whether إِلَى means up to or whether it means to include. So just wanted to mention, is it to include the ankles? Is it not to include the ankles? Wait a minute, so what's an ankle anyways? So an ankle is different than a heel. Okay, I'm just gonna draw it really quick with the worst drawing ever. So here we go, and here we go. So this would be the little bone. Oh man, it erases by itself. Okay, this is so weird. Actually erases by itself. Let's do it again. Okay, here's the foot. Okay, excuse my art. And then you've got the bone that's sticking out. I mean, it wouldn't be sticking out this much, man. That would really need biopsy.
Oh, there's a
Okay.
bone.
Okay, Noura. Okay, this little bone that's, no, Noura, you actually forgot that there was a bone there?
No, it was just so small. I was like, where is she showing the bone?
Oh, okay. Oh,
Sorry,
great. Okay, so there's the little bone right there. That's the bone that basically marks as the place. Is it included? Is it not included? So this is basically al-Ka'b. Okay, in the slang or colloquial Arabic. So if we're talking about Bilad al-Sham, they'll actually consider al-Ka'b to mean the heel. Okay, but in proper Lugha Arabiya, al-Ka'b is actually this one. Al-'azman al-nati'atan, al-'azmatan al-nati'atan. It's basically the bone that's sticking out, which basically is right here. Okay. So yeah, just to mention that one, because I know that in certain Arabic accents they might actually understand things differently. Okay, number 5, الترتيب. الترتيب, really? To have it done in sequence? That's differences of opinions between scholars. So wait a minute, what does tartib actually mean? So we're talking about doing it in a certain sequence. Let's say you're basically doing your face, hands, then the head, then the feet. Okay. So why did they say that you're supposed to do it in sequence anyways? So the reason why they had differences of opinions is because you see this little tiny wall right there? That one? No, that one's asli. Yeah. So let me erase that one. That one's not. This little one is not included because that one is asli. Okay, it doesn't want to erase. Now you know. That one. Why? Oh yeah. Okay, hold on. I'm using the wrong tool. Like, why isn't it erasing? Okay, this is asli, so that one's not included. Okay, وأيديكم إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا برؤوسكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين. Okay, so you see this little wa in Lugha Arabiya, it can mean, and there are differences of opinions on this preposition, on whether it means just an addition or whether along with the addition it means a sequence. That's in Lugha Arabiya. They had differences of opinions on that letter wa, just like they had the differences of opinions on the preposition ila, which means up to. Was it really up to, or is it including? And same thing here. If this A is saying wash your faces and your arms up until the elbows, and also wipe your heads, and also wash your feet, is this and, is this necessarily indicating sequence or not? That's differences of opinions. So the Prophet ﷺ himself did always make wudu in that order. And the Prophet ﷺ has said, هذا وضوء لا يقبل الله صلاة إلا به. This is a wudu that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not accept any prayer except if a person were to do it that way. So then they had differences of opinions on whether this is talking about the sequence or whether this is talking about what you're supposed to be doing. So can I wash my feet first, then wash my face, then wash my arms, then and then wipe my head? Okay, let's see. Al-muwala. What is al-muwala? So al-muwala is different than sequence because this is succession. This is talking about washing those areas without having any pauses. Okay, but you're actually going in that. So a sequence is to do A right after B, right after C, etc. To do it in that order. But succession is I'm washing my face, but not then talking on the phone and then coming back to it and, oh, where did I leave off at? And then continue. Okay, that's al-muwala. Muwala is not, you're not spacing out between your washing. Okay, so without any interval, any pauses between the two organs, you're basically doing it in order. You're basically doing it right away and without any pauses. Okay, and let's see. Okay, now the part about, let's see, it's 11:40 right now. So let me see if there are any questions on the side to give that some time, right? Are there any questions before I move on? If there are any questions before I move on, be happy to listen to them because I promise to give some time for the questions too. Okay, no one's asking questions. Okay, now the part about saying Bismillah before making wudu. Is this obligatory? Well, in general, scholars actually had differences of opinions on whether saying Bismillah, which is an abbreviation with it, the word at-tasmiyah. Okay, so at-tasmiyah is an abbreviation, so it's kind of like an idiom to mean saying Bismillah. What if I am in the bathroom and, I mean, not in the actual stall, but I'm in the area where the sink is at? Can I say Bismillah there? Okay, that's the question. Do I have to say Bismillah? That's another debate, whether you have to say Bismillah. Do I have to say Bismillah Rahman Rahim? Or should I just say Bismillah? Do I have to step out, say Bismillah, and come back in? That's that area of debate. So, but in general, what is considered as obligatory out of all of these? So we know that we've got the nose, the nostrils, we've got the mouth, do we have to do it 3 times? That's a sunnah. To do it in 3 times, like washing the face 3 times, that's a sunnah. Okay, the whole, the thrice or the 3 rule, or making things in 3, that's basically sunnah. And what about the part about washing the nostrils? And some scholars actually considered that what's obligatory is the face, hands, head, feet. Why? Why did you mention these ones? Because those are the ones that were mentioned in the A. Face, hands, head, feet. Then they had differences of opinions on the mouth and the nose. Wait a minute, what about the neck? That was the Shafi'i. The Shafi'is were the ones that said the neck is included. Okay, but there's really no authentic hadith in that regards. Samira, you wanted to say something, dear. Go ahead.
Yes, 2 things. Number 1, that if we forget to say Bismillah, can we say Bismillah awwalahu wa akhirahu in between?
So, I mean, you can say Bismillah even in the middle, okay? But the scholars actually had differences of opinions on whether it's obligatory or not. So Bismillah ala awwalihi wa akhirihi, that was mentioned in regards to eating.
Eating, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was in regards to eating. But then the scholars that said that it's obligatory, they regarded that if they're saying it's obligatory, that means you got to redo your wudu. But the scholars that said it was sunnah, they said, well, good for you. You said it in the middle. That's all right. Yeah, that would be nice too.
Okay, so we can say it in the middle. And the Hanafi also wipe their necks, because in Pakistan and in India, they teach them to wipe their necks.
They teach them to wipe their necks? Okay. Maybe that's remember, well, there is a common thing in a certain madhab, and there are certain things that not necessarily common. So you might actually see some variance between the Hanafis, let's say in Pakistan, and between the Hanafis in Bosnia.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And those are different schools. Even though it's a Hanafi, and Bosnia is not strictly Hanafi, by the way, very strict Hanafis. Well, so are Turks. They're very strict Hanafi. But the Hanafism that is practiced in Turkey is different from the Hanafism that is probably practiced in Pakistan.
Right.
Right? Even though, it's one school, but you will have variance in what a certain area might have regarded as the preponderant within the Hanafi madhab. And maybe one took Muhammad Hassan al-Shaybani, maybe the other one took the fatwa, maybe Zufar, or maybe Abu Yusuf, etc. So you will see
Oh
some.
yeah, so that's what you were saying about scholars in the same madhab even having differences of opinions, right?
Absolutely, there you go. So that's why you will see influences in Pakistan, for example. They'll have certain influences that are that is different from the influences that the Muslims in Bosnia had. Shafi'iyya, you see Malaysians, for example, and Indonesians practicing Shafi'i madhab, but their Shafi'i practices are certainly different from the Shafi'is that are in Syria. We're really different. Palestine is Shafi'i as well. Well, we have a lot of differences, okay? But in the end, is that it's something to be mentioned and is definitely considered. Okay, so why do we do wudu anyway? So we would do wudu basically, one, to do that purification from the different acts. Basically, number one is to remove any contamination, whether we're speaking about physical or whether we're speaking about things that are probably internal, or ma'nawi, to mean something moral, maybe? No, ma'nawi is more, in internal, ma'nawi, and the effects it has on the person's psychology, person's spirituality. So that's when the person would do Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. It's basically to remove the inner contaminations of shirk, riya, and so many different things that might take your niyyah outside. And it's to remove any impurification that is physical onto the body. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيَجْعَلَ عَلَيْكُم مِّنْ حَرَجٍ وَلَكِنْ يُرِيدُ لِيُطَهِّرَكُم وَلِيُتِمَّ نِعْمَتَهُ عَلَيْكُم لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. This ayah, let's say, Allah does not intend to make difficulty for you, but He intends to purify you and complete His favor upon you that you may be grateful. So what does that mean? That although some might feel that there's a burden in wudu, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, but no, it's not actually to make a burden on you. It's basically to give you purification. It's to complete the blessing upon you. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. Perhaps that you may be thankful. Okay? Thankful. Well, thankful for what? That you were given the inspiration of how to be connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how to remove the contaminants, how to stay within the borders of tahara, the borders of cleansing, and the borders of light. And that's why the ayah would always start, even with Surah Al-Ma'idah, starts, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, in order to remind us that the part about salah, the part about the different orders in regards to the different restrictions, or at least the different, let's not necessarily call them restrictions, but let's call them inspirations. Let's call them different, let's give a different word. It's not a restriction per se, but it's actually a different guidance. Okay, it's a guidance. وَلَا يُحَافِظُ عَلَى الْوُضُوءِ إِلَّا مُؤْمِنٌ. The Prophet ﷺ said, and the only one that preserves al-wudu is a believer. What does that mean? That means I keep it and not lose my wudu even if I need it to pass gas? No, that's not what it means. It means that a person would always be considerate before making salah. They're really serious in, one, making wudu right, understanding wudu right, and definitely making sure that their salah is preceded by wudu. And that would only be a believer that really cares that I've got wudu before my salah. Because if they don't really care, they're just like, oh, not a big deal, I'll just pray and that's it. Only a disbeliever would be like that, or a munafiq. Okay, let's see. Sunan al-wudu. What are sunan al-wudu? Using siwak, that's a sunnah. So if you don't do it, remember, what's a sunnah? A sunnah means you will be rewarded for doing it, not held accountable for not doing it. And the Prophet ﷺ had done it often, recommended it, but didn't obligate it. Okay, let's do it again. It means you would be, let's write it down, right? Let's do that, right? Because this is important. This is usul. Okay, so sunnah means, one, you would be rewarded. So let's see, you would be rewarded for doing it. Okay, you would be rewarded, not accountable for not doing it. The Prophet ﷺ had recommended it. Okay, recommended the act. How did he recommend it? By not making it obligatory. Okay, so he wasn't mandating it. There was no imperative verb in it telling me you got to do it. Or if you don't do such, then you're going to be held accountable. If you are to do such, you will be at sin. That means it's telling me it's haram. Okay? If something is sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ had done it often. The Prophet ﷺ had done it often. The Prophet ﷺ barely left it. Okay? Left that act. And the Prophet ﷺ recommended that act. Recommended that act. Okay? That's what it means to do sunnah. Okay? Let's see. And let's just make sure that we understand this one. When we speak about sunan, or when you were asking, well, is that qiyas that we're making again? Is it obligatory that we are understanding, for example, how we understand imperative verb, all of that? And was that called qiyas? Was that called ijtihad? How do we understand it? That is the science of usul al-fiqh. Okay, that's not the science of fiqh that teaches this. This is the science of usul al-fiqh. Usul al-fiqh, not fiqh. Okay, so fiqh is learning what you guys are learning. Siwak and what we're supposed to do in wudu, you know, all the details and their evidences. But usul al-fiqh basically goes deep to the core. Says, what's a sunnah? What's a fard? How do you know it's a fard? What's the evidence that it's fard? And so forth. How do I base something on, let's say, a certain wording, a certain grammar, etc., and consider that this is my evidence that this is obligatory. This is my evidence that this is what it means to do something and consider it as obligatory. This is the evidence that this is ijtihad, this is qiyas, etc. So that would be usul al-fiqh. That's the science of usul al-fiqh. Okay, let's see. So sunan al-wudu are basically the different things that the Prophet ﷺ recommended that we do, but they're not necessarily obligatory. Let's see. A siwak, using siwak. So whether while you are washing your mouth, okay, and basically it's in order, so while you're washing your mouth, you're basically putting water, and just like you're brushing your teeth, okay, and that's basically the time that you are mainly recommended to wash or at least use siwak. Why? Because it's basically preparing you for salah. Okay, let's see. Washing the 3 rule, whether it's washing your hands 3 times, your palms 3 times, or whether it's washing your face 3 times, or etc. It's the whole idea of 3-3-3. Okay, and that whole 3-3-3 part rule is basically a sunnah and not obligatory. So let's say you wash your face once. You know what? Let's say you jump into the pool and you had the intention that you are jumping into the pool for wudu. Okay. Do I have to, under the water, start, you know, washing my face 3 times and rubbing my face 3 times underwater? No. Okay. No, you don't. Because the whole idea of al-ghasl, what is ghasl? Al-ghasl actually means to wash. To wash means to let the water flow. It's different than al-masah. What's the difference between al-ghasl and al-masah? Okay, let's write that down. What's the difference between al-ghasl and al-masah? Okay, al-ghasl means washing. Washing means letting an abundant amount of water to flow in that area. Wiping, on the other hand, means you don't have an abundant amount of water flowing. So there's no water flow. So no abundant amount, maybe we should say it this way, no abundant amount of water, and it's not flowing, and no flow either. But I am using a certain amount of water. I had water on my palms and I just let the water basically get wiped. I just let the water basically just cover that area, and that's wiping. Okay, there's a difference. Okay, so the whole idea of 3 is basically sunnah. Number 3, البداء بالمضمضة والاستنشاق. It's basically starting your wudu with rinsing the mouth and the nose before washing the face. Before washing the face, not during. Differences of opinions. Okay, let's see. The Prophet in almost all the hadith, in fact, all the hadith, the Prophet would start with washing the mouth before the nostrils. Why? Because you don't want to wash your nostrils and then probably have some kind of a remaining thing and then put it in your mouth. Okay? So it's basically keeping your mouth clean. So washing your hands, then making sure your hands are clean, and then washing your nose right after it. Okay? And then washing your nose. All right? And then washing your face. Okay, let's continue. Using, let's see, what is it? Starting to rinse, inserting one's finger into one's thick beard. Okay, how did you jump from there when he was supposed to actually say making deep washes? المبالغة في المضمضة. Making deep washes. And unless the person is fasting, so you're basically trying to put as much water as you can in washing your mouth and washing your nose. Well, I did actually have some people think that you have to put the water, in your nostrils and like really sniff it up. You don't have to do that. Even if, some had said that there were health facts, etc. I mean, you want to do the health facts, it's up to you, but is it obligatory or a sunnah in Islam to sniff it all the way up? I mean, I've had people literally sniff it all the way
I've
up.
gotten bacterial infection in my nose from doing that.
Yeah, you don't want to do that, Noura. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, I don't do that anymore. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, good job. Good job. You don't want to do that because, of course, your hands, they can sometimes still contain some kind of germs that probably didn't get washed. And then if you were to do that, then you're taking water all the way up into your cavity, and you definitely don't want to do that because it's going to end up getting infected. But in the end, I'm just mentioning that one. And the other part is, we're almost done. Okay, let's see. It's letting your hands, especially if somebody had a thick beard, to let the water basically go into the hairs of their beard's hair. Well, their beards, yeah, the hair on their beards, yeah, whatever. You understand what I'm saying? And basically, it's called تخليل أصابع اليدين والرجلين. That's تخليل أصابع اليدين, meaning you're letting the water pour basically between the toes and between the finger, between the toes and the fingers, and between the beard as well. Let's see, starting with the right side of everything, whether we're speaking about right hand or right leg, or the whole idea, of course, of starting on the right side, from the right side, is basically a sunnah. And doing more than one wash to 3 washes, okay? We said that was a sunnah. Okay, this is it for today. We did a good job. Mashallah. Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Noura.
My son Zachariah, he gets a lot of nosebleeds.
Okay.
What I mean, I tell him I don't know if it's the dry air or what, but whenever he's having that or whatever, I just tell him to skip that part. Is that?
Remember, it's a sunnah.
Yeah.
It's sunnah to do the nose. So therefore, or according to some scholars, it's a sunnah. So therefore, if, let's say, since your husband is a doctor and he recommended that not to wash his nose, then that's okay. Even if he wanted to do a self-recommendation and he noticed that every time he would wash his nose that he gets a nosebleed, etc., then he could just skip it. It doesn't have to be a doctor's prescription.
Okay. Jazakallah khair.
It can be just, anecdotal through my experience, I noticed that every time I would wash my nose, it basically gets into dryness. It dries up. And then, of course, because it dries up, and then that's when I guess he's got this tissue right there that when it dries up, it basically makes it susceptible to having, I guess, nosebleeds. So, yeah. All right. So this is it. Inshallah. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. MashaAllah. I'm proud of those that came back. Sister Samira, you had a question here. Go ahead.
Yes, I wasn't sure what you said. Did you say that we're allowed to do wudu from the water in a pool, swimming pool?
Yes, I sure did say that.
Okay, but it's stagnant water, so that's okay.
It's
big
stagnant
enough.
water, but it's big enough. It has an amount that's big enough to basically make it clean.
And we don't know what has been done in it.
Yes, but that's why إذا بلغ الماء قلتين فلا يحمل الخبث. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ said, إذا بلغ الماء قلتين. All right, so if they basically, if it reaches a certain amount, okay, in today's basically units, okay, how much is قلتين? If we're talking about القلتين, the Prophet ﷺ had basically said that if it reaches that amount, which is almost 190 liters of water, in other words, almost 50 gallons of water, okay, and then in that situation, if we're talking about 190 liters of water or 50 gallons, American gallons of water, then even if, let's say, a child urinates in that pool, it still is considered pure. Okay, we're talking about almost 50.2 gallons of water or 190 liters of water. That's al-qullatayn. Okay.
Yeah, well, sometimes I feel, especially in public pools, you don't know how many people have urinated in there, you know.
Still, it's considered, you don't want to get yourself into this type of being strict and I don't know, well, what if the many people, what if this, at the end, خلاص, the Prophet ﷺ said, إذا بلغ الماء قلتين فلا يحمل الخبث, خلاص. That's enough.
That's the ease of the deen.
What was that?
That's the ease of our deen.
Absolutely, that's the ease of our deen. خلاص, that's what he said. Okay, that's it. سمعنا وأطعنا.
Okay, just
Simple as that.
Yeah.
وإياكم. I'll let you all have a rest right now. I know it's late for you. And